Is this one working? 1, 2, 1, 2.
Nie dy.
Need to really come close. Maybe this one is easier. I think we can start. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. And welcome to the officially third day of the conference, I would say. Welcome to everyone who came from different places to Tirana. I hope you're enjoying this day. Thank you for the organizers for this wonderful conference. And thank you for my panelists for being here this morning. I think we will have a lot to talk about today. I think this is a very wide, complex, and important topic as well. And I'm not sure we will be able to answer all the questions, but at least we can scratch the surface, so to say, and kind of give some recommendations or some suggestions on how we can move forward when it comes to this topic. I am happy to hear personal experiences from my panelists, but also their professional one, because they have a lot of it and they are leaders in many areas and come from different places. So I think that the combination of your experiences will be very valuable for this panel and today's audience. So without further ado, we have less than 2 hours, I would say, and I would like to start by telling a bit more about you to the audience. I have tried to shorten your CVs and biographies in 2 or 3 sentences, which was a challenge, but I will try. And so let's start from this side here. Welcome to Her Excellency Ruth Huber, Switzerland's ambassador to Albania since September last year. Ambassador Huber has a rich international experience in both development cooperation and diplomacy, having worked in Central America, Asia, Africa, and Eastern Europe. Good morning and welcome. Then we have, I'm sorry, I have too many papers and too many questions. Welcome to Ms. Magda Jakubowska. She comes from Poland. She is the Vice President of Res Publica Foundation since 2017, I think, where she manages key ventures in strategic development. She is also managing Visegrad Insight, a Central European analysis and media platform. She has a strong background in female empowerment and security, which led to an internationally recognized NATO campaign, Women Are NATO, #Women Are NATO. We have Veronika Skupa, comes from Czech Republic. She is the project coordinator of Forum 2000 Foundation, which is focused on supporting democracy and human rights. She is coordinating the International Coalition for Democratic Renewal, global initiative of intellectuals, activists, and politicians concerned with the expansion of power and influence of authoritarian regimes. Welcome. Next is Ms. Veldet Idrizi, currently serves as the Director of Culture, Youth and Sports in the municipality of Mitrovica. She was also a candidate for the mayor of Mitrovica. Prior to her political engagement, She served as the executive director of Civicos, focused on collaboration between the civil sector and institutions, as well as an NGO community building Mitrovica, a pioneer organization in the city that encouraged reconciliation and building relationships between Serbs and Albanians. Welcome. Mr. Petrit Seljimi, a former foreign minister of Kosovo and former CEO of Millennium Foundation Kosovo. As a children's rights activist in his teens, Seljimi in 1995 co-founded Post Pessimists, the first network of youth NGOs in the former Yugoslavia, and the organization later won Global Youth Peace and Tolerance Award. Welcome. And the last is Mrs. Aida Ćorović, a human rights activist, former journalist and politician. She is the founder and former director of Urban Inn, an NGO based in Novi Pazar, Serbia. Focused on community development. In 2019, she won the Conquering Freedom Award, which is awarded to women for their contribution to the strengthening of human rights, the rule of law, democracy, and tolerance. And later on, we will be joined by Her Excellency Christiane Hochman, who is the European Union Ambassador to Albania, but when she arrives, I will tell you a bit more about her biography. So, welcome everyone. I would like to start with maybe Mrs. Valdete. I found it quite interesting that only a week ago there was a premiere in Kosovo of documentary film Women of Freedom. And I found it relevant because in order for us to kind of understand where women are today and what are their rights, we need to have a bit of a context and understand the history, and not that far history, but maybe more recent one. And so this movie is depicting women activists under Slobodan Milošević's regime. How do you personally remember this period? And what is the legacy of women's protests and activism in Kosovo? And is it fair to say that women's participation in the independence of Kosovo has maybe gone largely unrecognized? What is your opinion?
Okay, thank you, Sanja, for inviting me first, and especially with this question about women and women's legacy. And thank you, Western Balkans Foundation, for organizing this conference and for inviting me to share my journey and my experience. So as an activist, when people ask me, since when you're an activist, I can't remember. And I was definitely motivated and empowered by women's movement on Milošević, when we were as a Kosovan under Milošević's regime. And somehow I was very young at that time. And so I've seen in all these women's protest march from Pristina to Drenica to the places where actually people were harassed and were killed and were missing. So, and women showed the courage and showed the, let's say, the vision. So for me, I will never ever forget all these pictures, how much they affected me as a young woman to continue, let's say. Later on, some of them are also in the audience here. So I remember Tuta Sachia, but also Miss Edita Tahir, that I look forward tonight. And I invite everyone to hear her story on the evening, because she was among the first leaders that motivated me. Otherwise, I believe that I wouldn't be here where I am today if their women would not be there for me, for my generation, and for generations later. Just right after the war, like many people in Kosovo, I also survived the war. And in short words, I know what the suffer is, and losing people and everyone. But what drove me to come back, because I originally am from the north, Mitrovica, and forced to live in the south, even today. So what drove me was exactly this women's power, and also all what have happened. So, and I said, and this links with this the name of this conference, Unstoppable. And I said to myself, since I survived the war and I'm healthy, there is nothing and no one that can stop me. to doing and building a city and a country that no one else, let's say, suffers as I did. And I consider myself lucky because others suffered even more. So, and on your question, if their work and they're persistent and if their movement is larger, unrecognized, I believe that yes, it's not enough recognized, and I think we should, and it's also my obligation, and that's also my driving force in any gatherings that I am there for young women or even my peers. I all the time want to share what motivated me, and later on also I want to share also the women also in the region, because at that time we couldn't see in the media what Women in Black did for Kosovo women, and it was the restrictions even there even for them. So I think that we should applaud, and I want also to use this opportunity today to thank them for making me a better person, a better leader, and better woman, because they were there for me, and I will be there for younger women.
I think this is a perfect introduction and perfect intro to the conversation. And now I would like to, on a similar note, ask Ms. Ćorović. You spent your whole life in activism and working mostly in the nonprofit sector, with being in politics later on, but
Very short time.
very short. But being an activist always comes with a set of risks, but being a woman activist only amplifies it. How would you say that being a woman activist influenced your activism?
First of all, I apologize. I will speak my language because it's easier for me. English.
You should hear the translation.
Yes, we have a translation. Mislim da je to, kako bih rekla, vrlo spontan izbor. Mislim da čovek postane aktivista onda kada ga nešto snažno gurne iz zone komfora. Sada je naravno pitanje šta je to za svakoga od nas zona komfora.
I think that becoming an activist, am I correct? Sorry, is a spontaneous thing. There is something, a force that will push you in making a choice. So the choice remains yourself.
Za nekoga je zona komfora čak i kada je zaista, kada se valja u blatu, ali nekako to doživljava kao poznato okruženje i blisko okruženje i ne želi da promeni to. Za mene je početak aktivističkog angažmana počeo onda kada je počeo rat u Jugoslaviji.
For some, this zone of comfort that they choose is walling in the mud because they will feel well there. To me, the pushing force when I started to engage in the activism work was the war that started in our former country.
Dakle, ja sam aktivistkinja više od 32 godine i bilo je puno puta, bilo je trenutaka kada sam sebe pitala zašto ja ovo radim, zašto to svom životu radim, sebi radim, zašto to radim svojim roditeljima, svom bratu, deci svog brata, ali kad bi prošao taj talas pesimizma, ja sam se uvek nalazila opravdanje i uvek sam nalazila ubedljive argumente zašto se mora nastaviti dalje.
I have been an activist for 32 years now, and there were times when I wondered why am I doing this to myself, to my family, to my parents, to my brother, to my brother's children. But very soon this pessimism would go away, and I would keep on doing whatever I'm doing.
I bilo je veoma teških trenutaka kroz koje sam ja prolazila. Ljudi me sada poslednjih 2 godine uglavnom znaju po tome da sam uhapšena kada sam napala mural osuđenom ratnom zločincu Ratku Mladiću. Međutim, malo ljudi zna da sam ja 2,5 godine bila pod 24-satnom policijskom, pod policijskim obezbeđenjem 24 sata. Bukvalno i to je trajalo 2,5 godine.
Many people wonder why I'm doing this, and many people know, others don't, that I was arrested when I attacked the mural of a convicted war criminal Ratko Mladić, and surveillance and protection?
Takođe sam pre nekih 13 godina imala ne punu policijsku zaštitu, ali svakako policijsku pratnju, kada sam se vrlo snažno oduprla politizaciji devojčica i u zloupotrebi religije islama, mislim ovde pre svega, u političke svrhe.
Also, I have been, maybe not under police protection, but strong police escort for the past 13 years when I resisted the abuse of little girls that were used for religious Islamic causes.
Kada sam dobila tu 24-satnu policijsku pratnju, ja sam, mislim, bila prva osoba u Srbiji koja je govorila javno, jasno i glasno, koja je odlaske mladih iz Sandžaka, iz Kosova, dovela u vezu sa organizovanim kriminalom. I to je bio zaista ozbiljan razlog da meni bude dodeljena, jer su svakodnevno bile pretnje smrću i to je bio razlog da se meni dodeli, da mi država Srbija, takva kakva je, dodeli 24-satnu policijsku pratnju.
And the reason for this 24-hour police protection of myself was actually lied in the fact that I also resisted the criminal that was very present in Sanjak, and there were death threats against my life and limb. This is why the state of Serbia, as it is, provided this 24-hour police protection for me.
O tome koliko puta sam bila na ulici maltretirana od strane i policije, ali i političkih neistomišljenika, to prosto nisam ni brojala, ali mislim da je ključno važno da čovek sa sobom ima, da bude u miru i da sa sobom negde raščisti, da donese odluku da je to što radi dobar način da se odupre zlu oko nas.
There were countless cases when I was accosted and molested in the street, and I don't know exactly how many times this happened, but it is very important for a person to remain calm, to find a peace in their mind and continue doing whatever they justify by themselves.
I evo kako je Valdete rekla, za mene je u stvari najvažnije bilo to da ja kroz sve ove godine, kroz sav ovaj proces, ja postajem bolja osoba, da ja postajem čvršća, da ja postajem kvalitetnija, da ja ne odustajem od stavova koji su meni važni i da je taj nekakav etički, da taj etička, moralna vertikala postoji svakodnevno, to je za mene bila, da kažemo, zvezda vodilja i da ja nikada nisam, kažem, prestala da zapravo ja rastem u tom procesu. To je za mene najdragocenije.
And just as Valdete said, it is very important to continue following your vision and dream, and this is why I continued with my work, and in a way I tried to follow this ethical and moral vertical that allowed me to do to become a better person, a better woman.
Thank you. Mr. Selim, some might wonder why we have a man on this panel when we are talking about women as catalysts of democratic change. But I think that men's support is very important. So I would like to hear from you, how do you see personally your role in helping achieve gender equality? And what do you think men should do, especially men in leadership positions?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sanya, WBF for the organization, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's difficult not to use cliches in some situations, but I really stand on shoulders of two giants here, between Valdete and Aida. There have been, for the last 20, 30 years, very few people, men or women, who have been so fundamentally engaged in making society better. Really, with the cost of personal safety, with the cost of family time, with the cost that is not paid by most of people. They don't want to pay that cost. So again, on my personal behalf, for you and Valdete, we know each other for many years. I have to start with the recognition of this genuine, gigantic contribution that you both gave. there's also this moment where we are at right now, which I have to apologize in advance, but is somewhat more pessimistic than I would have appreciated in terms of how can we give contribution as men to the agenda of progressive causes of women empowerment, inclusion, and leadership. I used to be, I led for the last 6 years a foundation in Kosovo, Millennium Foundation Kosovo, financed by US federal government, focused mostly on energy, but also a strong component of women empowerment in economy. So we did a lot of scholarships, internships, grants, quite a substantive investment. And prior to that, I served in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Kosovo as a deputy minister and a minister for a year. So I had both, and as you explained many years ago, decades ago, I was also in civil society and media. But I have an impression that maybe 15, 20 years ago, when there was an actual genuine hope and potential of European integration, some sort of cornerstone of political, civic engagement, there was a sense of direction. I fear that that sense of direction has been lost, and that has impact across the board. It has also impact in the way that there is a real, undoubted regressive forces coming in our societies, meaning women-hating forces, meaning nationalistic forces, meaning forces that are really pulling us backward. And I speak about even kids. Now, some of it is structural, social media, lack of political progress in terms of bilateral relations, Kosovo, Serbia, Bosnia, Bosniaks. But I do think that time has come for platforms such as this one, this conference, and other instruments to really go to the core and talk to the kids. One of my favorite projects that we did was a YSI Kosovo, 13-year-old girls. We brought 100 girls from Serbia, Kosovo, Albania, Montenegro, and 30 from the United States to do personal development in a summer school and science and technology. They did all sorts of things like AI coding, and NASA was one of the sponsors, so they did a lot of planetary research. But I could see these girls who are so thirsty for platforms of equality, for platforms of expressing themselves, of becoming leaders, and helping each other to become leaders. So I do think that we really have to go back to the roots, to primary schools. And you, who are, all of you, leaders in your own respective landscapes, contexts, should not, and I should not allow, and we should not allow for bureaucratization of processes so we can tick the boxes. I feel that, for example, RICO was established as some sort of exchange mechanism for kids, for youth. Is it functioning really? We have ticked the box. Minister of Foreign Affairs, I was part of the Berlin process. We all said nice things, but do we have exchanges? A lot of other embassies, donors, governments are paying lip service, but there's so much focus on these big issues which are clouding and taking over the attention, that we forget that unfortunately we really are facing a very shaky tectonic ground underneath us. And I do, as my initial thoughts, do believe that we really have to work with youngest generations to try to arrest those negative tendencies. They come from tabloids, they come from politics, they come from even, popular Andrew Tate. It may be not political, but actually has impact. It has impact when tabloids attack her for painting Mladic, and it becomes vicious. You could have died. And this, maybe 15 years ago, was not the situation. Now it's more than ever. So indeed, I think there has to be a way in which we try to engage the younger generations as some sort of restart of that progressive, and I have to say, fully feminist agenda, unapologetically feminist agenda. There cannot be any political correctness here. with the onslaught of religious extremism, political nationalism, there can be nothing but uncompromising agenda of women empowerment and equality with no apologies to people in power, including when I was in power at that time. Thanks.
Thank you. Madam Ambassador, when you hear these stories, personal ones, but also you have a lot of experience from working all over the world, what do you think, based on your experience, personal and professional one, what can women leaders in the Western Balkans do to include more women in positions of power and to include more women in general? And do you think that this is a responsibility of every woman in leadership position? Do you think that each woman has the responsibility to stand up for other women?
Is it on? Yes. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Western Balkan Fund for this great title of today's conference. I really think that Unstoppable is a great title, because sometimes, perhaps especially women, need sometimes a little push and encouragement to take on positions of leadership, positions of responsibility, decision making, and Unstoppable gives this positive idea, this push that sometimes is needed. Now, listening to the other panelists with this very direct personal experience as activists, really impressive. I think that the experience or the point of view that I can bring in will perhaps be a bit more from the government ambassador's perspective, a bit more bureaucratic. But of course I also have my personal experience as a woman in the Swiss system, where despite being really an old democracy, there is a lot of room for improvement with regards to women leadership, women in politics, in positions of decision making, especially also in the private sector, but also in government. And then also my experience in working in different cultures and different countries. Yes, what can women do, and shall every woman really promote then women's leadership? I think first of all, one point I would like to make: we should not expect that every woman, for example, in a leadership position recruits only women, every man only recruits men. We need to have this mixed society, this shared responsibility for promoting women in leadership positions. That needs also a change of mindset in many societies. It's not only up to women, but I think women do have an important role leading by example. I think this is one point I would like to make, to give the example, to be role models. I think it is very important for young women, girls, to see women in leadership positions, to see women as recognized professionals, to see it is possible, it is recognized in society. So this aspect of giving the example, leading by example. But this is only possible if there's also a certain number of women in such positions. So how to reach sufficient numbers in leadership positions, decision-making positions. And that needs then the efforts at different levels, at the personal level of the people in positions of decision-making, to, for example, to really ensure equal access to jobs, that we are not like, that we don't stumble over sometimes invisible thresholds that are there. For example, to think, a young woman might get pregnant and then she's absent from the job, so we don't recruit her, or the style of communication of young women is perhaps different from men, so does this fit into our company? There are sometimes unwritten, invisible thresholds that make the access to jobs difficult, so we need to be very aware of that and really at personal level promote women into different positions. But of course it's also a responsibility of the state, of the governments, to take measures to beat by by imposing quota. That is a possible measure. It has been taken here in Albania, for example, with, I think, impressive results. Other governments, other countries opt for different measures. Just to give some examples where I see we had some success, or we are slowly having some positive results in Switzerland, is, for example, by allowing more part-time jobs, even at levels of responsibility, even in management positions, that make it more easy to women to combine their different roles in society, their different tasks, to work part-time, or to have job sharings, even at highest level. I have ambassador colleagues now in the Swiss system, where the woman and the husband both are ambassadors, and our ministry really tries to take this into consideration. It's still very new. It required a lot of flexibility of them to post them in the same country, and then one of the couple is ambassador for the residence country and the spouse for the neighboring country. To look for this kind of models, it is possible, although I think 20 years ago, surely our human resources would have said, no, never, this is too complicated. So sometimes it also needs that flexibility. And perhaps a last point where also the governments, now thinking of countries, of the region, should take measures, or where it is important to take measures. First of all, ensuring good education, access to education. And then also, and that was just mentioned before by Mr. Selin, the economic empowerment. I think it's not only the basic education, it's also personal development, and it's economic empowerment. If women have access to good education or to vocational skills development, to have access to activities that provide them their own income, that gives a certain independence. And very often this level of independence, also that also means economic independence, a certain level, I say, that can help for self-esteem, first of all, but also then to step up in hierarchy, to take on more responsible positions. So these are some of the thoughts I would have on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this. Ms. Jakubowska, you come from Poland, where unfortunately in the last couple of decades we are seeing very restrictive laws in terms of women's rights, women's reproductive rights, abortion laws that are terrible, violent, but also very restrictive laws when it comes to LGBTQ communities and marginalized groups. At the same time, in this kind of circumstances, you are creating an women's empowerment campaign that is focused on having more women in the security sector. How would you say that things have changed in terms of your campaign, maybe, and how would you give an overview of the situation in Poland when it comes to women's rights right now? And maybe there are some lessons we can learn about what happens, when we allow for these things to happen. Maybe it can be kind of a very bad reminder.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for having me here and having this conversation, this dialogue that we need. I think this is part of my response, that we need to talk about women, their engagement, and how important it is overall, globally, and for the future of our democracies. In Poland, the situation, apart from the question of abortion and huge discrimination in that sense, women have always been kind of put in this societal traditional role. We have strong church in Poland, and the influences of that you can see also now with the abortion law. And what Mrs. Ambassador has said, like this, those educational programs, this kind of equalizing of this traditional role of women, giving them space to also be mothers and have their professional life, is kind of key to success, I would say. Nowadays in Poland, there is a huge decline in terms of women's rights, and it's not only the abortion question, which is limited to zero now, and really what is happening and the political decisions towards women exactly, or also the communities, the sexual minorities, is kind of a harassment to what we are. Women in Poland are well educated, they have their voice, they have always been kind of a basis to our societal change. We went through different periods in Poland and in the region, and it wouldn't have happened without women. We have fantastic role models. We the same can mention like numbers of women that I've been inspired, who were drivers to the communist removal from Poland. And I think that what now is happening, the threat to kind of limit women and their development, is kind of cutting our legs to work better and longer. In terms of my campaign, which is Women on NATO, it is NATO. NATO is very much engaged. It's partly NATO sponsored, but I wanted to pay attention not only to. Of course, it's important that women are not present in the security sector. Let's say, military-wise, the representation of women in Poland and in the region is really low. Because of the war, it's getting more enhanced, but still, finding a female general in Poland or around countries, I think Czechia has one female general, but this is just impossible now. But apart from that, I wanted to pay more attention in that campaign that women can have and should have a say in every area of interest, especially that the question of security and safety of women is of safety of everyone, right, is also the matter of women, and they should be invited to the table and be kind of present and understand that their say is also important.
And Veronica, you're coming from the Czech Republic. In only recently there were multiple, I think, protests of support to women of Iran, and led by also young women in your country. So, being a young woman yourself, how would you say that today's fight, women's protests today, are maybe different than before? Sorry, and is the fight different, or are only the tools new? How would you generalize?
Thank you, Sanya. First of all, let me mention that I feel. Really honored to sit here among such significant personalities. I myself don't have that many experiences from activism and politics. I don't have this strong story behind my work, as I was born in a free Czech Republic already. But as Sanya mentioned, I'm working in Forum 2000 Foundation, which is focusing on human rights and democracy around the world. So I had the chance to meet really strong women and personalities that are inspiring, and like meeting here and listening to stories like this is really inspiring for me as a young woman who is trying to be also more involved in a meaningful work. As for the generational approach in the protests, I would say that there is a really strong continuity of the content of the protests, but of course, young women, young leaders can bring some new perspectives to the issues that should be addressed. And of course, I would like to highlight the importance of, for example, social media in this regard, because social media are providing to women to mobilize around the important issues, organize themselves. We saw that, for example, during the protests in Belarus. It was really important there. It's also providing a platform to women that wouldn't have probably a space to share their views and their opinions and experiences. It's also providing a platform to share awareness, and as such it's helping to overcome this traditional underrepresentation of women sorry, in mainstream media and politics, I would say, and also of course to reach wider audiences. So this is definitely one of the tools that help the younger generation to be more active and more visible in the public sphere. And as my fellow panelists mentioned before, I would also like to highlight the importance of better access to education, which has a huge impact on the economic empowerment, on the participation of women in public sphere, in politics, also health and well-being, especially the reproductive health, and in some sense is helping with the cultural change that is connected to the shifting from these traditional gender roles.
Thank you. And as I already mentioned, so whenever we have these protests and women on the streets fighting for equal rights, they're usually also individual protesters, but also women's organizations who are doing so much in the field actually to help things change. But I think that in the Western Balkans there is a serious tendency of shrinking the space for women's organizations, and recognition of their work almost as a rule appears in the form of contributions they make to official state processes, and in most cases it is these organizations that initiate these processes in the first place. However, there is very little recognition from the governments when it comes to this. Why is there so little acknowledgement and support of these organizations? Whoever wants to answer, Valdet.
Yeah. Before I answer to this question, I want also just to say that giving up or being pessimistic, especially when you live in divided communities such as my hometown, Mitrovica, that's a luxury. So, for me, overcoming all possible barriers, being a woman, being an Albanian, being an activist, in all possible identities, I think this really helped me a lot in order, and of course, without being persistent and believing in your cause and creating allies from all possible sides, simply I wouldn't be here where I am today. And first of all, believe in yourself. I think this is sometimes it's hard. I think we have to believe and never to stop, but just to pause and reflect. Somebody yesterday said nicely, I want to repeat today. When I wanted to start right after the war, by basic human need to go back to your home, to do something and to return in the other side, so in the northern side. And I knew that I had to talk to my peers, to this a dialogue. And everybody thought that I'm crazy, you know. Still our wounds are there. And how dare you want to talk to the Serbs, what you are going to say. And then, believing, being persistent, not being not allowing yourself to give up. So simply, we sat down, we talked, and we'll build up a wonderful organization, which is even today serves, is the largest organization, peace-building organization that serves as a bridge between communities in two sides. It's called Community Building Mitrovica. And even today it's led by extraordinary women. So most of the people that worked at CBM, it counted until 60 in the same town. It's a large. So it was the power that we forget. We take it for granted. We forget sometimes to trust, let's say, in ourselves. But also, why man being on this in this table, I think it's extremely important also to find allies. I have a grandmother who is 107 today, and she's healthy. She's amazing, and even she sends regards because I talk to her a lot. She says, "Whatever you seek in this life, you will find. If you seek for love, for compassion, you'll find. If you seek for problems, you'll also find." And also she says that you, in any darker situation, you will seek for the light. You will find. And just short example, she had some problems with her left knee, and she went to the doctor, and the doctor looked her ID, her age, and he said, "Come on, you're 102. Sometimes you should have pain or something." And she stood up and she said, "Dear doctor, this other knee is the same age as this one, but it's healthy. So please fix it and don't look at the age of the women." So, and this example really tells us that sometimes, we have really to see the brighter side, because that would drive us. And this helped me in all the struggles that I had. And the other thing that I also want to share to mention is, I think we have to be creative. We have to be super creative. After the riots 2004, when the bridge, physically the main bridge that divides the city into Albanian and Serbian part, was closed with barbed wire, so physically you couldn't cross the bridge. So I, as a leader of the organization, a leader of both Albanian and Serbian staff, so I had to motivate my team to come together and to decide what we are going to do. And as Ambassador rightly said, leading by example. If we don't come up together, who else would come? And then simply I sent all possible letters to all international organizations. They all said no. The reason was my security and my safety. So simply we cannot. We decided to open an office in the north. So what I did, being super creative, and I think that we have no luxury not being creative anyway, but I falsificated a document. In Japan, in Swiss, I would go to jail. But I falsificated a document, which the first one was original, to be invited in the court district, because it was in this kind of confidence zone in the northern side. So believe it or not, for 8 months, 3 times a week, I falsificated this document to go and to say that I need to go to the court. And my mission, which I actually shared with all others, please, I need to motivate my team and to come together. No, it didn't work. So I found this way risking that they will catch me, because they were UN forces vans that were driving me 3 times a week. Sometimes I got stuck in the north and waiting until the dark, so people wouldn't see me and attacking me. But I think if I wouldn't be persistent at the time and creative and a little bit of crazy, because I think that also goes with all the activism, today we wouldn't have CBM, that strong bridge, and having some great impact also to young generations. We wouldn't have a wonderful, thank you, we wouldn't have a wonderful Mitrovica Rock School, which is, it works as a bridge with 2 sides. This restores this common cultural identity that the city has. It unites children from both sides and all communities. And we wouldn't have amazing women's organization, Mitrovica Women Association for Human Rights. They were just some of our little projects. And today they became an amazing institution that I'm really proud of their work. And not surprisingly, they're all led by women. So, and I wanted just to share this example, not, let's say, not forgetting also all the successes, not recognizing successes, because sometimes as a human nature, we take it for granted. So yes, look back, learn from that, and take that energy and go forward. So I think my grandmother again, she said, don't allow yourself to be victimized. Just no, don't let yourself. Find your voice, find your way, and you'll reach there. And I think this is the message also I'm sending to everyone. Absolutely. I did it and I will do it. I will be and I'm unstoppable as everybody else in this room. Thank you.
If I may, just 3 points. From the experience of the last 6 years working at MFK, there are 3 very concrete things which I really would like to mention of how, because I think you asked about what can governments do. And I'm also segueing a little bit towards what the Ambassador mentioned in terms of economic empowerment. Kindergartens. To get women from passive, because they're not unemployed, they're fully employed, especially in Kosovo, but they're employed, caring for families, parents, kids. So there has to be explosion of kindergartens in our societies in order to ensure that women can have time from their obligation, which is imposed by the society, and are able to go to the labor force and become economically independent. B, subsidies for women-owned businesses. It's a fundamental necessity. Women inherit less in Balkans. Parents give to the boys the house, the land. That means that the woman doesn't have collateral to go to the bank. If he has idea to invest in a bakery, in a technological project or whatever, you go to the bank, you don't have property. Men have property. I think that's across the entire Balkans. So that has to be compensated by government for women-only subsidies. Not men pretending to be women and putting their wife in front, but like genuinely well-controlled and well-designed program in which you try to balance that gap in financing between women and men, where women are genuinely, because of this structural problem of inheritance, completely unable to get the type of support, banking, credit, financing that men get. And the third one is indeed education. And education, I know all these programs, European integration, social sciences, but you really have to start thinking about what are the demands of the labor market in Europe, because we are trying to get into Europe, and in our own labor market. So a lot of science, STEM, mathematics, coding. I think this has to be a national program, a regional program. Funds such as WBF, Western Balkan Investment Framework, EBRD, all these good-willing, big financial institutions, embassies, governments, have to have a structural, dedicated, and we're talking about millions, we're not talking about hundreds of millions, but those millions will have a butterfly effect and will enable empowerment of women. I fully agree. Without economic independence, everything is in vain. Because in the end, money talks. In your own house, vis-a-vis your own husband, or father, or brother, money will talk. And this is where there has to be now a dedicated, structural, full, as a part of the European integration process, effort to remedy and mitigate such huge structural problems and challenges.
Ja bih, ako mogu, da još jedan korak, da kažem, priču još vratim unazad. Naime, treba da ponavljamo, ma koliko nam se to učinilo da je nepotrebno, da je svakodnevno važno da govorimo o ljudskim pravima.
I would like to go a step backward, if you allow me, please. I think that it is of essential need to speak about the fundamental human rights always.
Ja sam pre 23 godine bila u timu među jednim brojem ljudi koji je tada u vladi Zorana Đinđića radio na promociji strategije, pravljenju proizvodnje strategije smanjenja siromaštva. I tada sam naučila ključno važnu lekciju. Siromaštvo nije pre svega nedostatak novca. Siromaštvo je nedostatak ljudskih prava.
23 years ago, I was a part of a group of people who were working at late Prime Minister Đinđić's time on creating and promoting a strategy for poverty reduction. And then I learned one very important thing, that poverty is not in the lack of finances, rather it's in the lack of human rights.
I dakle, možemo da govorimo i o obrazovanju, treba da govorimo o obrazovanju, treba da govorimo o ekonomskoj nezavisnosti, treba da govorimo o svim tim temama, ali je, po mom mišljenju, ključno da govorimo o tome da su naša društva, da se na dnevnom nivou pokušava da se svakoga dana pomalo krune, da se načinju ljudska prava i da ono što smo s teškom mukom dostigli, da se sada regresira i da se to sada zapravo upropašćava.
And I believe that certainly education and economic independence are of vital importance for the women's position in a society, but I believe that it is of crucial importance to work in the societies where it's an everyday effort of the society to nibble of the rights that we have had before and try to restore them rather than have a regression in this path of promotion of human rights.
I svi mi u ovoj sali znamo da se ljudska prava ne poklanjaju, da se ona zaista otimaju, ali takođe svakoga dana moramo da ponavljamo i to da jednom osvojeni prostor ljudskih prava ne znači da je to zauvek osvojena sloboda i da mi uvek možemo da regresiramo. Poljska je možda najbolji primer za to.
We all know that human rights are not given for free, and it's rather the case that they are always, in a way, kidnapped from their persons. And also we must be aware of the fact that once we obtain a human right, this will not mean that we have it forever as a freedom. Rather, we should constantly work on it to maintain that level.
Ovde takođe postoji jedna vrlo opasna mimikrija, jedna prevara koje mi moramo da budemo svesni, koju vrlo često primenjuju vlasti u makar postjugoslovenskim društvima, a to je da se mnogo toga zapravo uvija u celofan, da se mnogo toga fingira kao postignuta sloboda, a da zapravo iza toga ne stoji istinski napredak.
And also we must be aware of something that is a continuous action of the governments in the former Yugoslavia, some sort of a mimicry, a fraud that they keep applying, that they in a way wrap something in the packaging of a human right or other kind of right which actually is not so. And it's just for the illusion that is placed before the people.
Ako u ovom trenutku pogledate statistike u Srbiji, Srbija je fantastična. Dakle, mi imamo ispoštovane kvote, oko 40% žena je u parlamentu, žene su na veoma važnim mestima odlučivanja, žene su ministarke, imamo premijerku, ali Srbija nikada, barem ovo poslednjih 30 godina koliko ja sam vrlo aktivna, dakle u društvenom životu, Srbija nikada nije pokazivala manje zapravo osetljivosti ka pitanjima žena.
And for example, in Serbia, the statistics say that everything is fantastic in terms of women's rights and quotas. For example, this 40% quota has been achieved. There are ministers, there are women, the prime minister is a woman, but actually this is the poorest condition of women that they experience in Serbia nowadays.
Ja sam jedna od osnivačica ženske platforme za razvoj Srbije. Pre 23 godine smo započeli tu avanturu. To je jedna mreža političarki, aktivistkinja, novinarki, naučnica, žena iz akademskog sveta i mi smo se snažno zalagali tada za kvote na svim nivoima, ali danas, nažalost, kada vidimo taj pređeni put, vidimo da je zaista mnogo toga urađeno, ali ja nikako ne mogu da budem zadovoljna da imamo žene koje su suprotnost od onoga za što smo se mi zalagali, žene na tim javnim pozicijama.
For 25 years, I've been a member of women's development group in Serbia. This is a network that involves scientists, academic women in academic positions, decision makers, and yes, we have achieved a lot, and we have accomplished high level of human rights. But I cannot ever be satisfied with the fact that there are still women who are on the opposite side instead of where they should be.
Dakle, pitanje za sve nas, pre svega pitanje koje sebi postavljam je kako da nađemo dobru meru između kvota i kvaliteta tih žena, kako da ne odustanemo od kvalitetnog obrazovanja, apsolutno slažem da je to ključna stvar, ali kako prodreti u obrazovni sistem koji je ekstremno zatvoren i koji se namerno pravi tako da pravi poluidiote, da pravi nemisleće ljude, već poslušnike, jer režimima koji su trenutno oko nas, koje mi živimo, takvo obrazovanje odgovara. Dakle, mnogo pitanja i mnogo zadataka za sve nas koji smo sa strane, koji nismo u sistemu, kako uopšte napraviti dijalog i kako pokrenuti bilo koje vrste procesa pomaka napred.
And the question we all have to ask ourselves is how to find the right balance between quality and quota. Certainly, we need to develop education, but in a way we have to penetrate into this very closed system of education and define in a way us as the outsiders that do not belong to the system, the many tasks and questions that we need to ask and answer in order to further.
Thank you. And that was actually my next question to you, but you already mentioned it. So thank you. So I think that what is mentioned several times here is the importance of education and the importance of actually doing the thing behind the numbers, actually, behind the statistics, that it's not all about the quotas, because we have examples all over the world that quotas are respected, but the actual change is lacking, right? But aside from that, I think that everyone has a role in this. Governments, media, civil society organizations. And I would like to ask Magda, because you also lead a media platform, and you know a bit about the industry, that type of industry as well. What do you think is the importance of media respecting everyone, and what role does it play in women equality?
So we can look at this from two sides. I think something that I wanted to mention, and it hasn't been raised so much yet, and I think that to some extent it's also a clue to our deliberations here, is that women, apart from getting the voice, they themselves have to take it. I mean, many women are not bold enough to take their own space in media, in public life, even at their homes. So it's important for women to feel self-confident and understand their skills, their role, and the importance of what they do, and how much being a half of the society is meaningful. Because we mentioned education to some extent. In Central Europe, women are really well educated. Of course, some economic empowerment would use. But we are very skillful. We are better educated than men, statistically. But very often I can see that women don't want to take those leadership positions, or they don't want to take their voice heard and given in public. So, for example, in that sense, leading media platform, we tend to give space to women as much as possible. We encourage women. We at Visegrad Inside we put all our efforts to have equality, to have as many women writing articles or taking part in our discussions as possible. And very often it's a struggle. It's not that obvious. I know many women in different fields who have the expertise, but they are a little afraid of taking their space in the public discussion. So there has to be some work very often done by the third sector and civil society organizations, but also at homes, at schools, that women should be lesser afraid of taking their space in the public life. So, as said, we very often tend to invite as many women as possible, even way more than we initially invite men, because we know men will take those invitations, while women will have their second thoughts and think of whether they can really do it and whether what they say will be clever enough, blah blah blah. No, I'm pretty sure that if we invite those ladies to join to express their thoughts, it's overthought, and we do it on purpose, and we know why we invite them. So so it's not obvious that we can somewhat secure this diversity, but I think this is very important, and some of our campaigns are directed to that there was some more women in the public space, that there were more women in media, not as only presenters, but that they really share their ideas, their knowledge, because they have it, and having them more on this professional capacities will maybe step by step, and maybe it's a long process, but will kind of ensure that that the listeners, that the society that is watching them will finally understand that it's necessary to have equality also in the public life, because it's important that we have all the perspective employed, and I think this is crucial to give more space and take good care that for women to be in those public positions, whatever this is, media or policy making, or I don't know, education experts. Yeah.
Thank you. And Madam Ambassador, when we're talking about females in leadership positions, I can give you the mic if you need it. Females in leadership positions, you're a diplomat, and maybe you had an experience of working in areas that were affected by unrest or maybe conflict even. Do you think that being a woman in decision-making positions in those circumstances helps reconciliation, helps building peace? What is your personal impression?
Yeah, difficult question, but you're right. I have worked in situations of unrest and even war in Bosnia also, and in other countries as a delegate of the International Committee of the Red Cross, actually before I became a diplomat. I think sometimes it is always a bit difficult to generalize the characteristics of women and men, but in some situations we do see that the communication skills and the listening skills are perhaps sometimes a bit different, and I think there are good examples where women in leadership positions or women networks helped to for reconciliation. I don't have a really good example right now of one of these conflict or unrest situations, but I'm sure there are these examples where the spirit of focusing perhaps a bit more on the substance, on the topics, and overseeing, then being able or being ready to look for solutions across boundaries, across political or ethnic or religious differences, having a bit more the society, the well-being of society in mind. There are examples of this. And if I, now not really speaking about an unrest situation, but very, very specifically here in Albania, what we see, to give one example from our development program of the Swiss cooperation, we strengthen municipalities in the whole country with a focus on the local councils in the municipalities. And in this program covering all the 61 municipalities, there is a local women's alliance has been established, that there are about 700 women councillors, women members of local councils that are active in this women's network, or local women alliance. And it is in a politically, I dare say, quite polarized context here in Albania. This network shows that it is possible to work together in a bipartisan way across and beyond party lines, more focused on issues and on exchange of experience and helping each other. And these kind of networks are really important also, and giving examples that it's we need to work together for the well-being or the good of society. And it is, as you also said before, Sanja, it is not just the to reach a good and equal participation of women is not just an issue of numbers and of quota. It is actually an issue of society, a mindset change in society. So it needs action at all levels, targeted action at all levels, from governments, but also from the private sector. They can also take measures because the society expects it, but also from the civil society and each individual. I think we need to take measures at all levels.
Thank you. But in order, I think, the actual change to happen, there needs to be political will, there needs to be better collaboration, and somehow that often lacks, I think. I would like to ask Mr. Selimi, you've been an activist first and then a politician, so you've been on both sides. How do you think that the civil sector and activists can better collaborate with governments and on all levels on gender issues?
Tough question, but I think there has to be a little bit of a paradigm shift from typical finger pointing and somewhat antagonistic relationship that by default sometimes civil society has with the government, and by all means some governments deserve so. But there has to be some nexus or some ability to reach across and work, if not with the central government, with local government. As you said now, Mitrovica, and you mentioned the Swiss Development Fund, because you always have to find some islands of institutional support to create an archipelago. If you cannot do it in a central level, I do believe firmly that it cannot always 100% day in and day out be attack. Again, sometimes it's well warranted Some governments deserve to be admonished, to be called for what they do or what they don't do. But you have to find also support players, support actors, because otherwise then nobody joins politics. If you don't enable the positive people and reach out and really cross political partisan lines to create these bridges of civil society and local or other institutions, independent agencies. The government is not only the prime minister with ministers. The government is really a very wide area of decision making, and I do believe that there has to be some sort of ability for a trifecta of public, civil society, and institutions to cooperate on what, in one day or the other day, are the priorities of the society.
And a question for all of you, actually. I mean, I think that in the Western Balkans, I think we see in the recent years a growing number of women's protests and women being louder than ever, if I might say. So is this something to be hopeful? I mean, obviously from the surface, yes, because it's always good to have women's protests. And
Just one sentence. In Kosovo, because of violence and murder.
True.
Protests
True,
were
true. That's
because
that's a
there
very
been
different
incredible
circumstance.
growth of violence against in COVID times. So there
Of
were
course.
women which were killed. So it is progress, but I don't know if it's progress.
Of course, and I think only yesterday we had in Tirana a protest in front of prosecutor's office because of the young Kenyan woman that was raped and later died. So there were protests about that as well. So it's an alarming number of violence towards women, but at the same time, I think that women are louder and tougher than ever. Are you hopeful for the participation of women in public space, their fight, their equality? How do you see this period? It seems like a very specific period in time, at least in the Western Balkans.
Yes, I'm hopeful. Not only because I have no luxury being unhopeful, but because there is a potential. And with all this, what Petrit was saying, which is true, we live in a very tough period, all of us. We live when, let's say, good examples are not promoted. The reason why I wanted to share earlier, because if you create an incident on the bridge, everybody will come. All the media will come and will write about it. But if you do something positive, a women's march or women's protest or anything, hardly one or there two will write about it. And I think what everyone should do, yes, promote even in the villages, all these local councils that Swiss ambassador talked. It's an amazing program. And in different municipalities, there are extremely powerful women that are not only talking and being loud, they are making actions. In my municipality, we have a young woman head of the assembly of the municipality. She was, the last two local elections, was the most voted woman. And she's 27 years old only. But she, in all the public enterprises, we have 4. Always, in our history, they were all the time only men. And it's the first time that 2 of them are now led by strong women. Welcome. That are led by women in our city's history. Secondly, she refused all possible commissions that did not have women in it. And not only the number, but women that were fulfilling all needed criteria. And these are some examples, not only I'm talking to the municipality where I work with, but also in other municipalities as well. And I think something that really needs to be done, as I said, promote, and these will inspire other women to believe what you said earlier. So, and impose yourself. As being let's say, a woman, that's true that many of them hesitate to take position in public service, be that it's as a civil servant or via a political party. But I think by by showing different examples. I think really it's, for me, I was only 5.5 years, I'm in politics. So I was activist for 25 or even more years. But now what is the lesson for me? I wish I could ask, not wait to being invited to run for the mayor in my city. But now if I say to the young women or other women out there that are already in the political party or political life, grab and don't wait to be invited for the position. Just be there and ask for it. So I was invited, but of course I stayed and I will stay. And we made some changes, and I'm really happy about the changes. But I think this is something that we have now this other hat as women leaders in either in local or government or national level, to lead by example and promote and support local initiatives. Thank you.
Sure, Ida, I would just like to welcome Madam Ambassador, Her Excellency Christiane Hochman. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I would just like to make a small introduction, and then I will leave the floor to you. Her Excellency is the European Union Ambassador to Albania. Ms. Hochman has held several high-level positions in diplomacy, previously serving as the German Ambassador to Bosnia and Herzegovina and Estonia. She also worked in the U.S. as the head of division in the political department dealing with U.S. domestic policy and congressional relations, and at the European Commission in Brussels, focusing on U.S. foreign policy, the Middle East, and Russia. Impressive career, and welcome. And I will get to you and ask you some very specific questions about your professional and personal experience, but I would like to hear from Aida, because before you came, we were talking about growing number of women's protests in the Western Balkans, and whether it is a hopeful thing that we have so many women on the streets fighting for their rights, but at the same time it is the reasons why they're on the streets are very scary and alarming. So Aida, please, your take on it.
Ja poslednjih godina govorim i sebi i okruženju da je treći milenijum počeo, ili treći milenijum će biti vreme u kome će žene biti ključni pokretači promena na globalnom nivou.
Since lately, I've been telling myself and the people around me that the third millennium will be the woman's millennium in terms of key changes that will follow.
I da, mi vidimo na ulicama, ne samo u ovom našem regionu, vidimo u čitavom svetu hiljade žena koje izlaze na ulice i koje se bune i koje s pravom traže da osvoje delove slobode koja im je zakinuta, ali takođe želim da sve nas podsjetim, ako nekada i očajavamo i čini nam se da je situacija loša. Dragi prijatelji, priča o oslobađanju žena traje tek nešto, čak i manje od 150 godina. I to je zapravo jako kratak put u odnosu na vekove koji su tome prethodili.
We have been witnessing situations not only in our region but globally of thousands of women going out to the streets protesting, revolting for their rights that they have been deprived of. But very often I try to remind my friends that the fight for the freedoms and rights of women has only been there for 150 years now. That's nothing in comparison with the millennia that have gone by.
Ono što treba da bude naš zadatak u narednim godinama i decenijama svakako jesu protesti na ulici, ali više od toga ja mislim da nam je važna saradnja među nama, da nam je važno povezivanje sa ženama iz drugih gradova, iz drugih zemalja, razmena iskustava. Mislim da je ključno važno da ne budu, da priče o pravima žena ne budu elitistička stvar, već da dođu do svake žene, do sela, do svake devojčice, da jednostavnim rečnikom objasnimo zašto je važno, zašto je jedna zemlja siromašna, zašto je Pakistan siromašan, a Švedska je bogata. Ja definitivno tvrdim da je to upravo zbog involviranja i poštovanja prava žena u tim zemljama, ili nepoštovanja.
certainly one of the tasks that women have to work on in the coming years and decades is protesting and revolting in the streets. But I believe that it's much more important than that to cooperate between ourselves to reach every village, every woman, little girl, and explain them about the reasons for the poverty. Why is, for example, Pakistan a poor country and Sweden is an affluent one? And I firmly believe that women's rights are in the middle of these discrepancies that exist in the world.
I sada ću reći nešto što možda ne zvuči aktivistički. Ja sam decenijama bila jedna ljuta, borbena žena. I nisam postigla baš mnogo stvari. Nisam promenila puno stvari u životu. A onda sam ja promenila pristup i počela sam više da volim sebe, da volim ljude oko sebe, da poštujem više život i stvari su počele da se menjaju. Ljudi me bolje razumeju, bolje shvataju moje poruke.
And I will now state something that may not appeal well to your ears and mindset. For decades I have been a raging and angry woman activist, but I failed to accomplish anything. And then suddenly I changed my attitude and I became a loving woman who respects life. And then the changes started.
Ja razumem da mi imamo puno razloga da budemo ljute, ali ljutnja i bes nam neće doneti puno dobrog, jer će pre svega nas negdje okruniti. Zato je jako važno da imamo strpljenja i sa ljudima koji ne razumeju ono o čemu mi govorimo. Ja mislim kada doprete do srca tog drugog čoveka, da sve možete da mu prenesete, čak i poruke za koje on potpuno gluv i slep.
Certainly we have the right to be angry and raging, but this is not the way we will achieve much. Rather, we should be patient and try to reach the heart of our colloquiators, and thereby we will be able to convey the message that they would otherwise never try or be able to understand.
I pošto sam ja prava aktivistkinja u duši, to nikada neće prestati. Zapravo sam najviše s razlogom došla na ovu konferenciju, ne toliko da vam govorim o sebi, već zapravo da pozovem moje prijatelje iz Albanije, da pozovem ljude dobre volje, da razmišljamo o tome, da u narednim godinama svi zajedno kreiramo jedno divno mesto za žene Balkana i decu, da napravimo neku vrstu letovališta. Ja poznajem mnogo žena, mnogo samohranih majki, mnogo prekarnih radnica, mnogo žena sa margina koje nikada nisu bile na moru. Njihova deca nisu bila na moru, a pošto Albanija ima neverovatnu obalu i ima fantastične uslove za tako nešto, da možda Albanija bude domaćin jednog takvog projekta, ili čak je možda ružno da kažem projekta, da to bude jedna ideja koja će se tokom godina razvijati, da napravimo neku vrstu, pa ne sigurne kuće, ali svakako kuće za letovanje, gde će žene iz čitavog Balkana po 10 dana dolaziti, gde ćemo zajedno kuvati, spremati, družiti se, govoriti na svim jezicima i čini mi se da jedna takva ideja, opet kažem ne projekat, jer prosto ne postoji novac da tako nešto plati, dobit je toliko velika. Dakle, da napravimo nešto svi zajedno i da to bude pre svega Albaniji na ponos, ali da bude naša tačka okupljanja i tačka promene.
What I would like to mention next is that I have not come here to talk about myself. Rather, I came here to invite my Albanian friends and everybody else present in this gathering for us to try to create some sort of a summer resort in Albania, as Albania has a fabulous seacoast with fantastic conditions. We can gather women there during summertime, because I know of women who have girls who have never seen the sea. So this would be a great opportunity, like a project, maybe not the project that's kind of an ugly word, rather an idea that would help us all gather in this sort of a safe house or rather summer resort where we could cook, talk in various languages, and be ourselves.
Thank you. Madam Ambassador, welcome once again. We covered so many different angles here, and we have guests from the Czech Republic and Poland, but you grew up in East Germany. And East Germany's gender legacy, I would say, is an interesting one and maybe valuable for today's topic. And could you maybe share the experience of growing up in that system, and maybe the fight for women's empowerment, and maybe if there is something that we can learn from that time and even implement maybe some kind of mechanisms in this transition in Western Balkans countries.
Thank you very.
It's working.
It's working. Thank you very much for this question. I think there are a couple of points that actually we can draw from it. I mean, there is this legacy which was said, women, girls who grew up in the former communist bloc had more rights, etc., were promoted more, etc. I think there are two answers to that. One, yes, there were a couple of things that did not exist and I did not have as a barrier as a child. So, for instance, if you think about your professional choice, who do you want to become? What do you want to do during the rest of your life was not necessarily put into, women only go into those professions and men go into these professions. So that was way more open. But I would claim it was not way more open because this was a more open society, which was more interested in equal rights. But those were societies and regimes that desperately needed women to be part and 100% part of the workforce. So the motivation was a different one. It was not about respecting women's rights as basic human rights. Because in the end, it was still expected that the women do the homework and take care of the kids. So I think this is things we need to be aware about. There were effects, yes. We were more participatory in the workplace. We were more present. But it doesn't mean, beyond March 8th, when you got your red carnation, so the political exercise, that's the only thing that actually accepted you as a woman. So once a year, you were good enough. So I think there is still something to fight these stereotypes. So we did not grow up with a completely equal system. And I think it still will take time because it's breaking also not only the professional barriers, because I think with regard to your professional choice, this is not something where somebody is going to tell you, you can't do this. But if somebody says no, I think we should much more often say, why not? Why do you think I could not do this? Because this is sort of, often we retract too quickly. Say, okay, they blocked this, let's find a way around, let's find a different way. But I think we should be more outspoken and saying, please tell me, explain, because that will make it very difficult for the other side to literally give you good reasons for not doing that. So I think that was one of the important ones. And it came in very handy in the end when actually the wall came down and suddenly there was this other part of Germany. And suddenly there was this whole different society, because even though we spoke the same language, we were brought up in very different ways. So we had to navigate a new system. So in a way, by accident, I landed in the diplomatic career. This was not a plan, and I had a completely different profession in East Germany. But that is one of the most conservative and male-dominated jobs you can have, and particularly when you go up to ambassador's level. So, in the beginning, of course, you're constantly mistaken for the new secretary who will make the coffee. And it takes guts, and I think Ruth has gone through the same experience. It takes courage to tell your boss, no, I'm not going to make the coffee, you can make your own coffee. Because it is very hierarchical. And of course, you still are intending to have a career. So this is the balancing act you go through, how to navigate. And I think something we have all learned, particularly if you work in a male-dominated area, women have to be at least twice as good. And in the end, we don't always go around and say, hey, look how good I am. But this is the typical thing in this environment where, sorry, we always call it, the men show the colorful feathers and women do the work. So, this is a pattern to change, but it takes literally professional generations to break this and to actually change by example. And I loved just now the recommendation, having women standing up and saying, we've had enough. This is not acceptable. But it's also about us networking much better, because we are really not far in that. Not only national networks, but then regional networks, international networks, because this also helps to go through some of the low points then in our work, when you're blocked from all sides and you have to think about it. So it's, don't take no for an answer, I think would be the biggest lesson I've brought along.
Thank you so much for this. I think you have a pretty good knowledge of the region. Worked in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and now here. And I'm assuming that you, if we're similar in anything, I think it's this common struggles and challenges we all have. What have you identified as the commonalities in gender issues, and how do you think maybe countries can better collaborate in these issues, and maybe even civil sectors and other countries can collaborate on this?
One of the big issues that hurts when you look at it is domestic violence, yes, which is still pretty prevalent here in the region, because it's considered to be normal. If the woman doesn't behave, you can just beat her up. And again, we are talking about changing whole societies, but this is exactly where standing up is important, but also creating, and this is where also working with donors is important, creating safe havens, because this is still lacking. Where can women actually turn to with the kids and leave such an environment? Because this is also the challenge for every woman who is in such a relationship, how to get out, find a way, get the counseling that you need. And I think this is one of the biggest tasks. It takes enormous amounts of courage, way more than we all have to do this, to stand up and to actually change your life and to make the point. You need to get the legal support to actually fight this. So these elements, the medical, psychological support, making sure that there's an environment you can move to. I think that's a job for all of us, because it exists in all of our societies. But I've noticed that here in this region, this is still a very strong and prevalent phenomenon, and one which we need to fight rather sooner than later, because this is the most harmful of all.
And I think also in the Western Balkans, I don't think we have such an issue with laws. The laws on paper are pretty good. The implementation is where the things get messy, I would say. So how can we make sure that the laws are respected? I mean, whoever wants to answer. No one?
I don't want to try and be smart, but and that's unfortunately that's very true. But we have very good laws on paper. But I think we have to be loud. We have to work together, all parties, the media, academia, civil society, politicians, government. But also, I think something that which I would, in addition to add as a recommendation, I would add for the political parties, because they make the governments, and they need to change when we speak about supporting women and gender equality. And I think this is hard. I'm only 5.5 years in politics, I mentioned earlier, but I'm very proud to say that last year we started an agenda 50-50, and by end of 2025 we aim in all the structures of the parties, from the villages to the central level, to have 50-50. We don't have any more women's forum. And just to give you the latest update, we just finished 2 weeks ago the youth, the elections on the youth forum, and so it in the steering committee, they were voted, actually, hidden votes with these digital new ways of voting, and majority, so 60% were young women there, and they voted a women president. So there is a hope, there is a potential. And I really, I'm proud, because for every single day I was there and mentioned women, 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 because I believe in women. And I believe also in myself being a woman, but other women, and in working together. And of course, here we had the support also of other professionals that helped us, and seeing examples elsewhere that also inspired us. So it's not like we invent the hot water, but I think that working all together in the networks, from the villages to the region and internationally, I think in this way we can fight also this violence and killings, and to everything else. That's why, again, I say that it's extremely important to promote positive examples, because they can change some other, in some other country, some other context. Because it changed in my hometown, it can change somewhere else. So, thank you.
Very quickly, and I think how to respect law, we should use law. Kosovo is not part of Council of Europe, unfortunately. Hopefully this will change in immediate months. But countries are now adopting Istanbul Convention. Kosovo has unilaterally adopted. But human rights NGOs, activists should really go step by step. If there was a grave breach, disrespect of human rights, violence, courts have not reacted, police have not reacted towards the grave breaches of women's rights, go to primary court, secondary court, appeals court, Supreme Court, go all the way to Council of Europe, European Court of Human Rights. You really have to. Some rights in the world were not given by the parliaments; they were actually given by the courts. Gay marriage in the United States was not Congress that voted; it was actually Supreme Court that decided. So I do believe that that activists should really use the system to improve the system where that is possible.
Ja bih samo, ako mogu, dakle, imamo s jedne strane dobre zakone, većina ovih tranzicijskih društava ima dobre zakone, ali primjena je uglavnom katastrofalna. Ono što je očigledno na delu jeste da mi fingiramo ljudske slobode, ljudska prava, i da je zapravo mnogo važnije šta piše u nekim izveštajima koji se šalju ka Evropskoj uniji nego ono što jeste zapravo stvarnost, i da je očigledno našim političkim elitama više stalo da se zadrži takvo stanje nego da zaista bude promjena.
It is absolutely true that the laws are good on paper, but their implementation in all these transition countries is extremely disastrously poor. The thing is, the reason lies in the fact that what actually is done is that rights are fabricated in a way. There is an illusion of having rights. Whatever the reports say, it is not the reflection of the reality on the ground, and they are sent to the European bodies, thus making fraud of the real situation.
I ja želim da skrenem pažnju na jednu temu o kojoj nerado se govori. Čini mi se da ovakvu vrstu stabilokratije pomno podržavaju i međunarodni partneri, da podržava Evropska unija i da je njima mnogo lakše i bolje da sarađuju sa korumpiranim liderima naših zemalja, nego da sarađuju sa nama građanima, koji takođe imamo vrlo često neprijatna pitanja i za aktere iz međunarodne zajednice.
I also must add that the European bodies support these leaders in our countries that fabricate this. Actually, they lie to them, and instead of listening to our ordinary people whose rights are actually violated, they would rather cooperate with these leaders who lie to them constantly.
Mi smo vrlo krhka društva. Mi smo izgubili najbolji deo ljudskog potencijala. Većina naših najkvalitetnijih ljudi je odavno otišla u zemlje Evropske unije. Mi više sami nemamo snage da se izborimo I ako vidimo na delu da mi građani nismo podržani od strane međunarodnih partnera, već da ta podrška isključivo ide korumpiranim političarima, podvući ću nekoliko puta korumpiranim političarima, šta nam to daje kao poruku? Ja kao građanka nisam ni malo ohrabrena time.
I would like to point out that our societies are very fragile, considering the fact that all our human potentials have long left our countries and gone to more developed places. And if the international partners choose to cooperate with the corrupt, and I will underline several times, corrupt politicians instead with the ordinary citizens whose rights are violated, then me as a citizen have no hope in these international partners.
We are discouraged. She didn't say no hope.
I evo završit ću sa tim, kada sam ja doživjela taj stvarno brutalni napad policija me, dakle policija koja treba da me štiti kao građanku me napala, ja to od države Srbije sam očekivala. Ali ja nisam očekivala da ponavljam, ni jedan predstavnik međunarodne zajednice nije pozvao na neki sastanak, ne da razgovara o meni i mojim rukama koje su me bolele tih dana, već o ratnom zločincu i onome šta je taj čovek uradio i kakav to uticaj ima na srpsko društvo. Naprotiv, čak sam napisala tekst koji je zabranio predstavnik, odnosno ambasador, ključni čovek OEBS-a, dakle organizacije koja treba da pomogne nama građanima, a ne političarima. Te poruke nisu dobre za nas. Žao mi je, ali te poruke nisu dobre.
Just the one thing that I want to mention is about the event that took place when I was brutally attacked by the police who were supposed to protect me. Thereafter, I have never received any support by no, and I repeat, no international partner. On the contrary, the ambassador of OSCE chose to ban an article that I wrote in this respect. I wasn't expecting that I be summoned to a meeting and explain how my arms hurt because of the brutal attack. Rather, they should have considered the convicted criminal Ratko Mladic during this meeting. And this is the reason why I have no hope and I'm discouraged by the connections with the international partners. What message do they give this way?
Thank you. I think someone wanted to add. Magda.
So I would add to that not only this typical activism, which I praise a lot, because in Poland the protests of women and organizers of those protests have been very vocal, and this is very important, and it has changed a lot. And these very extraordinary situations, as protests are, have changed a lot in Poland. We understood what rights women should have. We understood that freedom of media is endangered in Poland. I don't know if you imagine, but we had this one day when non-state-owned media were so much endangered of not being able to broadcast, that for one day to show people that the situation is really bad, they were off. Like, just for people to imagine what will happen if they don't have access to free media, which is important, but we shouldn't only act in the crisis situation. It should be on an everyday basis that we work, and this is mostly about the third sector and media, that we work with people, with our citizens, and promote the values, those democratic values, the values that we share in the EU and around the EU, in this transatlantic community, the values that should be promoted on an everyday basis. People should be aware of what their rights are and how much important it is when you lose and those and the barriers or borders are shoved a little bit by governments, by populists and etc. So promotion and an understanding and the civil education, civic education is a key here as well.
Thank you. Madam Ambassador, I think you wanted to say something.
Just picking up on your last point, I think even education could go further. It should be part of education at school. It should start in kindergarten. That actually this is something which is an individual. Of course, families mark kids, but if in the school system it's repetitive, sort of that patterns are taught, then it's very difficult to change behavioral patterns. And I think education is one of the core elements to literally make sure that we call it this term gender mainstream, but it has to be very clear. And to the first question, I think networking and advocacy are so important. And this is not only going into the streets, but I'm also talking about social media. And you can do campaigns on social media very quickly. Of course, it takes people to dedicate time and energy, but this is how you link up, and this is also how you get attention of media. Of course, you need free media. You need journalists who are willing to report on this, and also have editors who are willing to publish it or to give you airtime on this. So all of these elements have to work together. And I fully agree, all the legislation we can have, unless it's implemented, it's just a piece of paper. That's the point. But the implementation is us. Not only the governments, it's us, the citizens. And everybody has a member in the city council. Everybody has a member in parliament. So I think it should actually be women way across political borders who cooperate. It shouldn't be the political parties, it should be women who actually look into these rights. Don't look with the political glasses. And I know it here in Albania it does exist. There is a women members of parliament group, and they actually meet and work. So this is exactly going over the trenches, reaching over, because we have a common goal, we have a common challenge. And I think one element in what we have here in Albania is the enlargement process and the negotiations. There are two elements. One is, of course, legislation needs to be done. We need the basis, of course. It needs to be broken down in the regulations how to implement. But the third criterion, to tick the box, it takes a third one. It has to be part of the living reality in the country. That's only when you can tick the box, and it's considered to be done. And that's the longer one, and that's the more complicated one, because it takes from the police force. You know, if you go to a police station and you report, how does the police react? Do they laugh at you? Do they immediately usher you in, take you seriously, and take your complaint? So this is important. Does actually the whole judicial system, because it's not only because you were attacked as a woman, it's a citizen who has been attacked. It's violence against a citizen. It doesn't matter, child, old person, male, female, it doesn't simply matter. And this is what we have to get, that this is a normal process, so that actually what we call rule of law is actually happening and is not blindsided or has colored glasses, etc. And then, of course, it is a lot of work for all the donors beyond working with governments who are our natural partners and will remain our partners, elected officials, that's what it is. But it is also working with civil society. And at least for us, I have to say civil society is an extremely strong actor, also with regard of information. What is the reality like? That's very important because, you know, I'm a foreigner living here in Albania. I will never be able to dive as deeply into the issues like an Albanian local person could. So I need the local voice to give me impact. And the biggest task, I think, for us is to listen, to be there and to listen and to really notice what is happening. I think this is the core part where we should also have all our antennae out. But this is part of how we form our opinions. Are we always perfect? No, we're not. Are our societies perfect? No, they're not. But this is why we're here. We're all human, so this is why we need to build one block after the other. There is no quick fix, I'm sorry. I haven't seen a quick fix, I have to say. In the over 30 years I've been working on foreign relations. So there, advocacy, networking, go through social media. This is how you get noticed, much more than being in your place, village, town, country. So we link up.
Thank you so much. And since we have to wrap up, I would just like to ask one question to Veronica. Someone mentioned the importance of kind of emphasizing examples of good practice and that we shouldn't just focus on the bad things. Can you share with us some examples maybe from your country or examples of good practice that you can think of where women have fought for something and got it, even though if it was maybe small scale, but can you share with us some positive stories for the end?
Sure. Thank you very much for this very nice question. As I mentioned, I work in a foundation in Czech Republic that is dealing with more global issues of supporting democracy and human rights. So when you are asking if I could mention some good example or some role model, unfortunately, the woman that first comes to my mind isn't from Czech Republic. But some time ago, I had the chance to meet with Belarusian leader Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya, and she went to Prague and she shared with us her story, and this is something that really resonated with me, because she went through a really important change of being a stay-at-home mother and an English teacher. And over a really short period of time, she was able to become a leader. She was able to continue in the work of her husband, and she was able to unite the opposition movement in Belarus at that time. And even though that she was harassed by the authorities, there were many threats against her as well. She just tries to pursue her initial goal of the democratic change. And even though that this wasn't very successful, or the momentum and the protests were unprecedented, but the democratic change hasn't been finished. So let's hope that let's finish with some positive message and hope that she will be successful in the near future.
Thank you so much. I think this is a good time to conclude the conversation. I would like to thank all of you for your time and contribution to the panel. Thank you for the audience for listening. It was tough to sit still for 2 hours, I know, but hopefully you got some valuable insights. And I'm sure if you have some questions, our panelists would be happy to answer them in the hall. Thank you again.